obviously we've worked on a few clients together now, and obviously some of them have had some real issues with some of their corporate service providers in other jurisdictions. We've obviously helped them move to the Isle of Man and other providers. But how do you go about that, Martin? To me, it always looks quite complicated and a bit, something I wouldn't be want to endeavour to do by myself. But how do you help clients do that?
No, we did have that client you referred to me actually, who needed some help with a less than diligent corporate service provider, if you remember. And I mean, the first thing I'd say is the issue he had was he didn't have all the documents, so he didn't even really know what the share structure was or who the directors were or anything else, and it definitely limits your options if you're kind of starting from that point, because once the relationship has started to break down with the CSP, getting information out of them is like getting blood out of a stone sometimes.
Well, yeah.
That'd be the first thing I'd say.
So make sure before you take any action, is get as much information in your documentation in-house and in your hand before you kind of proceed. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, because you need to know, for example, if you've been using share nominees, it's important what the text of that nominee agreement is. And if you can't find it and you don't know what it says, then it limits your options as a shareholder. For example, shareholders can sometimes sack the directors, or they can change, various things with the company. But if you're not a shareholder directly, or you can't become one, then you're kind of starting on the back foot, really. So that would be the first thing that I would say, really, to sort of start from there.
Yeah, because I mean that one that we passed over recently, that was quite problematic, and like I said, the CSP, we weren't sure really if they're withholding or they just weren't very good, and that's the problem, isn't it?
Well, sometimes they just go quiet, and that was what happened in that case. Sometimes it's because they're too busy, or sometimes they're lazy, sometimes they're just incompetent, or sometimes there might be an underlying reason. Maybe they've got a suspicion of some type of the business that's going on or something, and they think there's some sort of regulatory matter in the background. There wasn't in that case, I don't think, but that's the issue. And then once you know that, then you need to make sure you got the terms of business as well, because that they've got to abide by that at the end of the day. And if you don't know what's in it, that's awkward, and it's particularly important if they've been overcharging you.
Yes.
So you need to kind of have a copy of that, really, in your back pocket to know where that's at, I would say. And then once you kind of know where you're at, I guess, the next thing, if they're not reacting, then the best thing to do very often is to ask for their complaints procedure, because all regulated businesses have got to have a complaints procedure. They've got to provide it with you on request, and they've also, once you've made a complaint, they've got to escalate it to someone internally who is knowledgeable, experienced, and is not conflicted over the matter. And so that normally sort of moves things on. And actually, in the case that we were talking about, it did actually. That we'd kind of asked for that, and all of a sudden they became very cooperative.
Yeah, I mean, you can always go for the subject access request as well. That's quite a good tool to make people stand up and start listening. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So once you've sort of got those, then you can kind of decide. Hopefully, they'll start doing what they're told, which is, if you want to change your corporate service provider, then you find another one. You've got all the information to give them. You've got all the accounts. You know who the directors are. You can demonstrate everything's in order, and that's fine. And if they're being, hopefully, if you've got the terms of business, you can kind of make sure they don't go silly when it comes to actually, termination fees, which is something they tend to do. So, I normally recommend people actually get the termination fees struck out at the beginning of a relationship when they take the business on, because, why should you? Most businesses don't have termination fees. So once you've got those, hopefully they'll cooperate. If they won't cooperate, then you can potentially use the Companies Act in your favour. If you're a shareholder.
Okay.
So you can maybe just appoint yourself as the director, or as sack them as directors. Change the registered office address yourself to somewhere else, another CSP, and actually just completely take it out of their hands. Again, the more information you've got, the easier that is, because you need to have the minute books and all that sort of stuff, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, excellent. What kind of things do you see at the moment in terms of is it the CSP business that you get involved in? What's the part at the moment? What's the kind of thing that's the in thing, if you like, or what people are tending to use the Isle of Man for?
It's a mixture, really. There's people who are moving, so they've already got an
Yeah.
existing structure. So quite often there's people who are moving that are unhappy where they are, and sometimes that's the result of, to be honest, the bigger companies being taken over by private equity and them not really behaving themselves in terms
No.
of providing the service that they used to. CSP business is a very personal business, and the more corporatized it becomes, the less personal it is, and the less good the quality is. That's my take on it, anyway.
No, I think
So
we're in agreement. It's a bit like the life industry. I think that's something that a lot of clients they don't realise with CSP or life and the private equity, and it's a shame both businesses are now really,
yeah,
really in deep with private equity. But if we look at, we've discussed this before, but the way I view it, it's a bit like you're kind of filing. When you're divorced, you're married, and when your divorce date is with private equity, these people are all going to be selling out on the
yeah,
next round within 5 years. So there's no inclination to serve a client, and those clients are looking at probably 5 to 20 year type structures, and it just doesn't.
yeah,
It's a total mismatch, and it's the same as the private placement life insurance solutions.
yeah,
Massively invested into by private equity, but the needs of the end client are totally unaligned to the investors and the owners, and that's why it doesn't work in my opinion. And like I say, I think we'll see. Again, it's like a cycle, isn't it? Really, we'll see some of as you know, my view on this. There's a couple of CSPs that I like that that you've introduced me to. They're family-owned, managed businesses, and I think
yeah.
that's definitely the way to go, really. And insurance companies used to be that themselves. They were mutuals, and
They did. I mean,
that was
look at Isle of Man Assurance. That was run
yeah.
by the same people for many, many years, wasn't it? So,
Yeah,
you
exactly. Yeah,
know,
and I think that's now it's just what can we go and acquire and screw over and move
yeah.
on again. And I don't like that. I just don't think it works for clients, and
No,
then that doesn't
no. I
work
mean,
for me.
it's just that it's massively become corporatized, and by that I mean, it's all about the money base, and there isn't a long-term view, particularly if they're owned by private equity, because as you say, it's a 5 year cycle basically at
Yeah,
best.
that's it. Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, like you, I'd always recommend the sort of smaller, personally or family-owned companies. I mean, and there's a lot more of those than there are of for insurance companies, say. So not to say there's
yeah.
a
It's
lot
very
of
difficult for
CSPs.
insurers.
Yeah,
They like
yeah,
to have a bit of heft behind them and a bit of
yeah,
but again, I think that's changed a lot recently. It's smaller, it's the smaller private equity backed businesses, which have now grown huge as well. So
yeah.
we'll see where that goes. But
Yeah, but in terms of
yeah,
new business, I mean, there is new business CSP wise out there as well. So I mean, these days the anti-tax avoidance rules in the sort of in the main jurisdictions in the sort of
yeah,
G20 make it difficult to use offshore structures, because obviously the tax authorities work very hard to ensure that their tax base can't be eroded by people who live there. But there are plenty of other places where you can pick up good clients where it's not an issue. So Dubai's the obvious one.
yeah.
Monaco, Caribbean islands. There's the digital nomads. There's more mobile people who aren't actually technically tax residents. So people who are on special visas in places like sort of Vietnam, Thailand, and so on.
Yeah.
They're all people who potentially can use, Isle of Man or other overseas lower tax companies as personal
Mm.
service entities, or maybe they're setting up software as a service businesses. Quite a lot of them are setting up sort of software as a service type tech-based businesses, and some of those,
Yeah.
as long as they're receiving, sales income and not royalty income, can work well in places